This is genuinely mind-blowing, as an insider has revealed what the New York Rangers are planning to do with their roster heading into next season, and some of the decisions are going to surprise Rangers fans. Not just surprise Rangers fans, have some Rangers fans absolutely livid. We're going to break down exactly what that is in this episode and how it has major implications on the team heading into next season in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 77% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, this channel is built for blue shirt fandom, and this is the place to be for all your daily New York Rangers content. But Bret, let's get right into it. It's been pretty dry throughout the summer. Not too much coming out, but we get a juicy update from Vince Mercogliano. Now, keep in mind, this isn't exactly what the lineup's going to look like on opening night. Anything can happen through training camp, but this is his sense of what's going to happen. He was on a podcast a couple days ago, and Balt Panarin broke down exactly the opening night lineup according to Vince and what he thinks is going to happen. And let me tell you, it is not my cup of tea. I'll tell you that. And I'm going to pop it up on screen here for everyone to see. This is exactly essentially what Vince Mercogliano thinks is going to be the opening night roster. You can see there Panarin, JT Miller, Lafreniere, which is interesting. You got Cooley, Zibanejad up the middle, and Brennan Othman, who's a guy we've barely touched on during the summer. Brett Berard, Trocheck, Taylor Radish. Then you have that fourth line, which obviously we know is going to be together. And then you have Gavrikov, Fox, Soucy, Borgen, and Vakanainen, Schneider. And Brett, what do you make of these lines? Because I don't, this is not my cup of tea. I really don't like these. I have to be honest. I'm going to put them back up on screen in a second, but what do you make of this lineup? And we're going to get into some like mock lineups in a second and what they actually should do with some of these players, but this is just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, Darius, couldn't agree with you more. And it's great to be back on this Monday, starting the fresh week with a fresh update that we have from Vince. But yeah, I
Yep.
don't like it very much. Not going to sit here, for the next hour and just break down every single player and why, I'm not a fan. But I'll give a couple tidbits here.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I don't like is that we're not seeing Artemi Panarin paired with Vincent Trocheck, which I believe we need to see. If you go back to that graphic right there,
Yep.
Vince has Panarin playing with JT Miller, which will still be, great, two dynamic players. But I like Panarin with Trocheck personally. I know you and I both believe JT Miller is a first line center,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something about Panarin and Trocheck's chemistry together that I'm a big fan of. And
Yep.
just to lead off of that, when it comes to Mika Zibanejad and JT Miller, that's a duo that I really enjoyed watching last season. When Mika was moved to the right wing, I've said it here on the channel multiple times that him and JT Miller looked absolutely dynamic. Something else I don't like about this lineup from Vince is the fact that, not only is Scott Morrow not on the opening night lineup, but he's not even listed as his seventh defenseman. I mean, Matthew Robertson, who I'm a fan of, is listed there as that seventh defenseman. And quite frankly, I believe Scott Morrow is more ready. He has more NHL experience. And while I'm high on Matthew Robertson, I just don't see him ahead of Scott Morrow on the depth chart.
Yeah, and I think that, with Morrow, again, we're going to get into a mock lineup in a second. I think there's a real possibility he makes the team, or maybe that he should make the team. Maybe that's the angle I'm trying to take it. But just to go back for a second, something that you mentioned with this lineup, that second line has no identity to me. That is going to be an absolute disaster of a second line, at least in my estimation. I don't like it. And I just want to say, by the way, this is what Vince Mercogliano thinks based on information he's gathered from the organization will happen. This is not, he's not doing it. This is not a slight against Vince. He does fantastic work. But to me, that second line just has no I don't know, jam to it. I don't even know what the word is. There's nothing to it to me. It does not excite me whatsoever. The first line is okay, but like you mentioned, maybe Trocheck and Panarin, there is some chemistry there, so maybe you want to keep that going. Although I will say the way it is here, you do have some more depth down the middle, but Zibanejad, we know, can't play defense, at least at the center position. Now, there's a couple scenarios, like you mentioned, I want to get back into Scott Morrow in a second too, that Vince Mercogliano outlined here, and he said that there's definitely a scenario where Morrow doesn't play the opening night and he doesn't make the roster opening night. And they just gave Vakanainen a 2-year deal at $1.55 million. We know that. So obviously they want him in the mix, and he'll 100% be in the competition for a bottom pairing spot. The New York Rangers like him. Schneider is also the power play 2 quarterback in that scenario. Don't hate that. We know that Fox is going to be power play 1 quarterback, so that's fine. This part gets crazy. I want your thoughts on Soucy because, we've been talking a lot about Carson Soucy on the channel, but he goes on to say they acquired Soucy with a 2025-26 role in mind, not like they were just going to flip him. And he's heard that they intend to give him a chance to bounce back. I don't believe they'll go into camp saying the best he can do is a bottom pair. He's going to be competing for a top 4 spot and, a middle pairing there. So what do you make of that? And because, again, if you look at the lineup, it just like, they're just not as good on defense with this, these pairings, I think. And then this also has Braden Schneider on the right, and they've been rumored to have Braden Schneider on the left, that they're at least going to try in training camp. So what do you make of, Carson Soucy probably staying in the lineup and playing regularly?
Yeah, well, a few things. If you could just go back to that graphic there. Yeah, right there it is. I want to break it down one by one as briefly as possible. So a scenario where Morrow doesn't play opening night. Look, I'm not going to it's not the end of the world if Scott Morrow doesn't make the opening night roster. I've said Gabe Perreault should start in the AHL, get some games under his belt, some more playing time, and then bring him up when he's completely ready. When it comes to Scott Morrow, I wouldn't mind seeing him in the AHL for a little bit as well, and eventually being brought up to play on this Rangers roster. But, the fact that Carson Soucy is, going to be competing for a second pair spot, while Scott Morrow, who, to be quite honest with you, if he would have played a full season last year, his pace was to finish with 35 points. That would have been second highest on the New York Rangers, even more points than Gavrikov. Obviously, Gavrikov is a better player, but I'm just saying it for context here that, he was on a pace to be the second leading scorer on the Rangers behind Fox when it comes to defense. So that says something for the young 22-year-old. So that's what really bothers me. It's not so much the fact, Darius, that Scott Morrow won't be on the opening night roster, because I'm a fan of Vakanine, and I like how he played last year, coming off his best season in the NHL. Didn't really play much before that in terms of games played, but we saw a guy that was a +8. We saw a guy that was a good defender, showed a little offensive potential. He's not going to, he's not one of the elite offensive defensemen in the league, obviously, but he showed a little flash last year. So I'd like to see him play, but the fact that Carson Soucy, Chris Drury believes that, this guy is a second pair player, I just don't see it. Now, moving on to Schneider here as the power play 2 quarterback, I don't really like that, Darius. I'm going to be honest with you. Like I said, Scott Morrow, I really believe should be that power play quarterback. The way he handles the puck, he's so fluid with the puck. He holds it on a string. He's got his offensive game is really good for a young 22-year-old. When it comes to Braden Schneider, he's got offensive potential, but he doesn't have the offensive instincts. You know what I mean? Like he's not gonna, score from the point, thread the needle type of thing that Scott Morrow does, and he did it at the University of Massachusetts, playing on the power play unit as quarterback. So I'd like to see Morrow take that role eventually. To start the season, I don't mind it being Schneider, but eventually I'd like to see Morrow take over there. But I'm not going to sit here and keep stressing out about Carson Soucy because I have nothing left to say. I mean, I've seen all I had to see. He's not it.
Yeah, I think we need to start making peace maybe with the Carson Soucy situation heading into the season. And you make a good point about Morrow playing as the power play 2 quarterback. And I think there's a real scenario where that does end up happening. But I think this is assuming that he's not going to make the lineup. He just won't be in the lineup. And that's why Schneider will be there. And Schneider, again, like you mentioned, great two-way defenseman, but maybe not as good in pure offense, at least, like a Scott Morrow. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. And again, I want to bring this up again because there's a common theme to me with this lineup. And again, this is just, I think, spitballing based on information from Vince Mercogliano. Second lines here. If you look at that second line, there's no substance there to me with Zibanejad up the middle. I don't like that. I don't like that fit. And when you look at the defense, that second pairing, Carson Soucy and Will Borgen, that is awful. That is going to be brutal. You need, I think, a puck mover and more of an offensive defenseman with Will Borgen there. I like Will Borgen and what he brings to a lineup, but you need somebody to actually be able to move the puck with him there. So that's something that I think frightens me a little bit just looking at that. And again, before we wrap up here, I want to bring this up. This is a lineup, this one that I've put together over the last couple days. And you have Vincent Trocheck still up there with Lafreniere and Panarin because I feel like you brought up earlier in the episode, that they work together. You have JT Miller with Will Cooley and Zibanejad on the wing because we know Zibanejad on the wing works better and, it works well with JT Miller. Then you have Bret Berard Parsonen, that nobody's talking about, they signed him for a reason. They believe in him. They want him to play third line center, I believe. So why not throw him there? You have Radish, and then you have that fourth line. In terms of defense, you have Schneider on the left. You're going to try it with Borgen, and then let the kids play on the bottom. You got Scott Morrow and Matthew Robertson. So what do you make of this one, Bret? I think this might be a little bit closer to at least maximizing their potential at this point, because if you look at some of these scratches, I'm not a big fan. Not that I'm not a big fan of Vakanainen, but I don't know. I feel like let the kids play over him, especially Soucy. Free up that salary cap space, because if you look at their cap space right now, you don't have much. Leave yourself some flexibility in season just in case.
Yeah, Darius, you couldn't have drawn it up any better. I absolutely love that lineup. I said here in the beginning of the video, a couple non-negotiables for me was Trocheck with Panarin, was JT Miller with Mika Zibanejad. So I love how you did that right there. When it comes to Parsonen, you make a great point, Darius. Nobody's talking about this guy. If he goes back to 2022, 2023 form, that's going to be a nice little third line there. You got a good balance of some veterans. You got some young guys. Obviously, the identity fourth line. And I really like the Robertson and Scott Morrow combination because, I said that nothing against Matthew Robertson. Vince had him as the seventh defenseman. Me personally, I just think, Scott Morrow should have been ahead of Robertson on the depth chart. But I like what you did there, putting the two together. Robertson is a stable defenseman. Scott Morrow brings that offensive upside. I really like that third pair. And why not? Give it a shot and see what happens. And what you just said about Vakanainen, I'm a fan of Vakanainen. I'm not sitting here and saying he's a superstar or anything like that. He still is only 26 years old. I would like to keep him on the roster, but like I said, I'm not gonna get angry if he's, not if he's on the opening night roster as one of the three pairing on defense. That's fine. If he's not, that's fine as well. I just think that he has a place on this team and he will be a contributor for the Rangers during the course of this grueling 82 game season and hopefully the postseason, which is even more grueling, as we know. And the last thing I want to say is Brennan Othmann, when it comes to the Rangers, they are just famous and notorious for playing guys out of position. I don't know how many times I have to say this, but in what world, and I have all the respect in the world for Vince, but in what world is Brennan Othmann your second right wing on a team that you can actually take serious in the postseason or really consider a playoff contender? Brennan Othmann played 22 games last season. He had 2 points, no goals, and now you want to talk about putting him out of position? I just don't see it. I like Othmann, but come on, we gotta, the Rangers, they did it with Lafreniere. They just do it all too often. I like to keep guys in their normal position. It's great to be versatile, but let's focus on, perfecting one position.
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point with Brendan Othmann. That's why, listen, I love the guy and I think that he looked good, at least in terms of the eye test at the end of last season, but I didn't have him in my lineup, right? And I feel like he could possibly be expendable at this point because I don't have any appetite for him on the second line on the right wing. That doesn't make any sense to me, like you mentioned. I don't have any appetite for Mika Zibanejad up the middle, especially on the second line. That makes no sense to me either, especially based on everything we saw last year. And then on top of that, Brett Berard has, actually shown me something where I'm like, this guy should be in the lineup. I really like what he brings to a lineup in terms of identity and what he can do on a third line. He can score, he can hit, he's quick, right? All of these things. Yes, he's a little bit smaller, but he doesn't play that way. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing. Again, this is just what Vince is thinking based on, information that he's gathered from the team. I will reiterate that. But if it is close to that, I don't necessarily agree with some of those decisions. I would let some of the kids play, but it's got to make sense with, the pairings, the lines, all of these things. And again, Vakanainen for me would be the seventh defenseman. You plug him in every now and then because, let Matthew Robertson, they're big boys, right? They can handle themselves, of course. So let Matthew Robertson, Scott Morrow handle that third pairing. But we want to hear what you have to say in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. But Bret, any final thoughts on these lineup decisions or, anything heading into the season? Because they don't have that much salary cap space left. Doesn't seem like they're going to make a move. If they do, it's somebody off the immediate roster. So it's going to get interesting as we creep towards the season here.
Well, I'm happy you tossed it back to me because there were a few little things that I forgot to mention because you made an excellent point about Borgen. I like Borgen as well, but we need somebody that can move the puck, to pair with him a little bit better. Obviously, Carson Soucy is not that guy, but when you talk about Borgen, I know he's coming off a down year in comparison to how he did in Seattle, but this is a guy that's been one of the best, shot blockers and physical hitters in the NHL over the past few seasons. He's been very good at doing that, doing the dirty work. And Schneider, the reason I don't like him as the power play quarterback as well, I just see him more as a penalty kill guy, more on the PK. That's his thing. He's defensively reliable, he's physical, he's in the dirty areas on the ice. And when it comes to Scott Morrow, who's my pick as the power play quarterback on that second pair, it's because the ability to shoot from the point. The ability to shoot from the point, I just believe that Morrow has the edge over Braden Schneider. And that's all I have to say about that. I just wanted to throw in those few little things because I forgot to mention that earlier, especially the Borgen point, which was great. But make sure you guys give us a follow on X at Rangers Digest YT, because the conversation always continues over there and also in the comment section.
Absolutely. The conversation continues there and in the comment section. Like you said, you can find us on X in the description and the pinned comment. And the last thing I will mention is if Carson Soucy is going to be playing with Will Borgen, maybe they consider that a shutdown pair, but I don't see it right now. I don't see it. I would love to be proven wrong, but I don't see it right now. We will see what happens. Let us know how you feel in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.